Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speak, Film, and Enter, a podcast where we review and rank movies. I'm Nate.
And I'm Dylan.
And with the new year, we have a brand new segment for you,
Yes.
which maybe we'll come up with a more clever name at some point. But for now, we're just going to call it the Speak, Film, and Enter Movie Club. And we will be reviewing and discussing an old movie, by which we mean just anything that isn't brand new, could have come out last year, 2 years ago, 80 years ago, anywhere in between.
Yep.
And we will be releasing one of these every Friday. And this is our first movie club selection, which will be Brazil, the 1985, some would call masterpiece by Terry Gilliam.
Yep, absolutely.
Which Dylan and I just watched before Christmas, so we thought it would be a really fun one to kick things off with. And then also, we will be announcing next week's movie club pick during this episode and also down in the description. So if you want to watch the movie beforehand, then you can stick around for the spoiler discussion in the second half. And Dylan, do you want to kind of tell them a little bit more about how the episode will be structured?
Yeah, so for this segment, we wanted things to be a little different. We couldn't really decide between spoilers and non-spoiler because, we're going to be doing very old movies, but we also might be doing from a movie from like 2019. And it's like, do we want to? So we decided that we are going to do about 10 to 15 minutes of non-spoiler review. We'll give you our star ratings, and then second part of the episode, it will be a spoiler review, and we'll kind of go more in depth into what happened. And again, we kind of conceived of this segment and like which movies to choose as just kind of conversation starters, maybe some that have like cult classics, some kind of under the radar, or just ones that maybe we've wanted to watch for a long time and just have never gotten around to but heard good things, which this one definitely is.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. So Brazil here, which I like the cover art here better than I did before I saw the movie.
Me too.
It fits really, really well. But Brazil kind of checks all of those boxes where it's a cult classic. It's a very highly acclaimed and well-reviewed movie from a very famous and successful director. We had never seen it before. So yeah, we could see anything from, like you said, like old classics to things that are newer, but maybe a little hidden, maybe a random foreign movie here or there, or sort of a third section, I think, would be stuff that we watched when we were younger that we might want to revisit and see, is it actually good, or were we just children and teenagers and thought it was cool because we were young and a little dumb? So we're going to try to vary the picks. Sometimes they might be chosen around another brand new movie that's coming out into theaters or on streaming that week, or maybe around holidays or any kind of thing. But generally, it's going to be something we haven't seen that we're interested in watching.
Yes, and we'll try to, we'll let you know where you can find it. We'll try to keep it to the major streaming things, but we're not going to limit ourselves to that like we do with our recommendations. We do subscribe to Criterion, and if it's a really old movie, it might only be available on Criterion. So that's just what it's going to be. But we'll try to keep it to stuff that's readily available.
Yeah, and right now, Brazil at least just left Criterion at the end of December, so it is rentable in all the places where you can rent a movie online for $3-4. So
I would say definitely worth it.
I think so too. But before we get into that, Dylan, would you like to tell the people what Brazil is about?
Absolutely. So Brazil from 1985, a bureaucrat in a dystopic society becomes an enemy of the state as he pursues the woman of his dreams.
Yeah. So this is this is a Terry Gilliam spin on the novel 1984, which pretty much all of us still living had to read in high school. And it's an interesting book. I had a very strange experience with that book in high school. I registered for AP English for senior year on the last day of junior year, which was technically like after you were supposed to be able to do that. So I never got added. I know, just a rebel in the AP English world. But But because of that, I never got added to the summer mailing list.
Uh-huh.
And 1984 was assigned as the book to read over the summer.
Oh, okay. All right.
So showed up first day of class. It's like sixth period or something. We get to the end of the class, and our teacher, Mr. Moss, who you also had, I believe.
Nice. Yep. Shout out to Mr. Moss.
Yeah. Said your papers on 1984 are due on Thursday or something. And I just, raised my hand and said, what?
Yeah, excuse me?
Could you repeat that, please? And then I stayed after and explained it to him, and he gave me a copy of the book, and he said, just do the best you can.
Okay. Nice.
So
Nice.
I
And did you?
crammed it in like a day and a half and then
Mhm.
wrote a horrible paper and kind of realized after I did all that I probably didn't need to do any of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair
But
enough.
that being said, I think the themes of this book are, they've been relevant since the day it was written
Mhm.
and still relevant today. And I think it's an interesting project for someone like Terry Gilliam to make. I had seen 3 of his movies before, some of the Monty Python stuff like Holy Grail, Life of Brian, and I'd also seen 12 Monkeys. So
Okay.
I
Yep.
kind
Yep.
of knew roughly what I was getting into, but it's
Mhm.
very different and much more fun and playful than the book is, for sure.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I mean, for me, I don't know how you already mentioned kind of the poster and how you like it now more than before. I feel
Yeah.
like the aesthetic and like the era that this was made in, or the year was made in, 1985, it seems like all the images that I saw of it made me think that I wouldn't like this movie. Which then I watched it and I was like, oh, it's beautiful and like it's cinematic and like incredible, but like why is it like all of the images, like if you search Brazil images, the most common one that pops up is that lady's face being stretched.
Yeah. Which I should have
And
grabbed for this. I have a few shots ready to go, but that
yeah,
one is really off-putting. And then just kind of the like 80s, like sort of Bowie look,
yeah, overly
that
kind
we
of
get with some of these.
like the 80s Excalibur movie that we watched where it's like stylized in a way that's almost a little too much and kind of off-putting, or almost like, or Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner, the aesthetic just being like grimy. Like a lot of movies in the 80s have kind of a visual aesthetic that I guess I don't really like, or that I just find a little rough on the
Yeah,
eyes.
it's like a weird mix between that and like spandex like hair bands.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a strange looking movie, but there's just so much great imagery going on. There's a lot of really good stuff if you pay close attention, like
Hmm.
posters in the background
Oh yeah.
of
Hmm.
like fascist slogans.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like loose talk is noose talk
Yeah.
is one that's
Yeah.
in there, and there's one about like ratting on your friends.
I was gonna say, I thought there was one that was like talking about like, yeah, ratting on like your neighbors or your friends, and like the right thing to do is to out them for you or something. Like it's like,
Yeah, I'm gonna see if I can find what that quote is
um,
because it's really funny, and
but it
it's
was,
in there enough where if like you don't need, it's not like a lot of these things are just in like one shot, and if you miss 2 seconds, you miss the whole thing. They're pretty common posters and slogans that are plastered all over the city and in the office building that Jonathan Pryce works at.
but yeah, it's just strange because yeah, the poster I didn't really like the look of the images with the lady in the stretchy face, or like the one of the city when the guy's kind of like looking down into the street. Like all the images that have become famous for this movie just were like the handful of times that would have been that I found off-putting. The entire rest of the movie, from start to finish, was like glorious to look at. It's so weird how that happens. I don't know why.
Yeah, I was really glad that we watched this one together because there were many moments that one of us just turned to the other and said, like, this looks incredible
Hmm.
with all the ducts. Make sure I'm enunciating. They're
Yes.
not ducks, they're ducts.
Yeah, the look
Um,
of the city and like the structures,
yeah,
massive metal, concrete, and then juxtaposed with these crazy dreams that he has, where he's flying through like beautiful skies and clouds, and like that, just that going back and forth between those two, like I don't know. It was a brilliant movie, like visually and cinematically, and that's a huge plus for it.
For
Um,
sure. I think, I mean, and to just go back to this too, like it juxtaposes with kind of the tone of the movie. Like
hmm
Jonathan Pryce as the main character kind of fits into this a lot, but his slowly, like, his dreams become more and more his reality, or at least what he wants his reality to be.
hmm
So
hmm
then that look, uh just the aesthetic of the city and the ducts and all that stuff becomes like more menacing as the movie goes along, because he is much less receptive to them.
hmm
Where early in the
hmm
movie, it's not really that big of a deal.
Yeah.
It's kind of what he expects to be surrounded by. He's just kind of a pencil pusher. And there's a very funny sort of running joke about how everyone thinks he's brilliant, but all of his ideas are just like, maybe we should try printing that thing that's on the screen and then we can carry it with us. Like, you
Yeah.
know, like very simple things that aren't even like ideas. They're just kind of how you would do your job. But he gets praised for not being an idiot, essentially. And,
hmm
you know,
hmm
just like a Gilliam dig at like bureaucracies, basically, which there are a
Yeah.
lot of in this movie. But I just like the way that he weaves all of those things together.
Yeah, I like that. I like how this movie is very funny. It's got a lot of great lines. Like you mentioned, the stuff in The Office. I mean, it's just it's satire, parody, a little bit of slapstick. I mean, Terry Gilliam he has a great eye and feel for comedy, and
For
that's
sure.
evident throughout. Um, and then yeah, I mean, I think we should get into some things before we get into the spoiler section later. So I think we should
Yeah.
definitely mention the cast.
Yes.
Which I mean, incredible cast of people popping up everywhere. One in particular.
Yeah.
um, yeah, so Jonathan Pryce, young Jonathan Pryce as the main character. Kim Greist as Jill. I thought she was great. I'm not sure what
Hmm.
else she was in.
Let me check
Um,
really quickly. You can run through the rest
yeah,
of the kind of big
Bob
hitters.
Hoskins, who you would 100% recognize if you don't know the name already. Ian Holm, who was Bilbo in the Lord of the Rings movies. We have Michael Palin, Peter Vaughn, who was the leader of the uh, what is it? The Night's Watch in Game of Thrones, the old guy.
Oh,
Um,
hold on. Hold
yeah,
on. Which guy was this?
Peter Vaughan.
Oh yeah,
He,
Peter
he
Vaughn.
played Mr.
He
Helpman
wasn't the leader. He was Maester Aemon.
or Maester. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
the elder.
Yeah.
We also have Jim Broadbent popping up, like a lot of
Professor
young,
Slughorn himself,
yeah, a lot
plus
of
many other
young
things.
British actors. And then
So,
we have the greatest surprise that we could have hoped for. Robert
yes.
De Niro is in this movie.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't even know. I have an image here of him. Should I? Well, we don't need to do the great one because I don't want to spoil it. But
Uh-huh.
this is De Niro in the movie as what can only be described as a sort of renegade, outside the law, borderline terrorist HVAC technician.
Yes.
And if that sounds strange to you, it is that strange in the movie. But Gilliam writes this character in a way where he's portrayed as basically Batman.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
he's a
he is.
hero,
He's a crusader.
especially to Jonathan Pryce's character, who finally is sort of introduced to and encounters somebody who doesn't just take what the government tells him as gospel.
Yeah, he's not a
And
cog in the machine like
right,
Jonathan Pryce is.
he's not a cog in the machine. He's not someone who's just going to stand in line
Mhm.
and go
Mhm.
where he's told to go. And he's portrayed in a way that is, I mean, it's just fantastic. And he has basically the same job as you. So I'll let you kind of talk about him a little bit
Yeah,
more.
for regular listeners, I did mention this in our roundup episode, but for anyone who might have missed that, I am an HVAC technician as my day job, and I'm always on the lookout for HVAC technicians or HVAC in general to pop up in
Yeah.
movies, and it is extremely rare that there's an HVAC technician in any movie, and so for him to show up in this and be as cool and badass. And also, I mean, he's the all-time greatest HVAC technician in movie history. I'm calling that right now.
He
There's
is
no way that's
one
not
of
true.
my
I mean,
favorite.
he should be the patron saint of HVAC technicians after this.
Yeah, I mean, he is one of my favorite characters in the history of movies.
Yeah, not even joking. We were cheering when because he only shows up really at 3 different times in the movie,
Yep.
and the third time we were like, me and Nate were clapping. We were clapping and cheering.
That's not an exaggeration at all. We both started applauding when he came back on screen. And he's great, and the whole cast is really good. But like the De Niro surprise is fantastic, and I mean, yeah, surprise, he's in it. But I think that's a good pitch to, like, if you were maybe a little curious about this movie, at the very least, watch it through when De Niro shows up the first time, because it's wonderful. And really quick, I did check on Kim Greist. She has been in a couple other things that I've seen. Also in the 80s, she was in a Michael Mann movie called Manhunter.
Oh, okay. I've seen that.
Which is Michael Mann's adaptation of Red Dragon, which is the prequel to Silence of the Lambs.
Mm-hmm.
And then she was also in Homeward Bound 1 and 2.
Whoa.
Assuming she was the mom.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. That's a blast from the past.
Or wait. Yeah, I think she's the mom. I thought maybe she voiced the cat, but that's not it. I think she's the mom in the movies, which I think that's kind of cool.
No, yeah, I think that's cool too. But yeah, overall, I mean, just great performances. Jonathan Pryce is fantastic as the lead. And I think, before we get to the stars, I guess just the only thing that we felt like was a weakness is there's a point in the middle of the movie where it kind of lags, or we felt like it lagged. And mostly that just comes from one of the things that bugs us about movies and plot lines is when there's a problem and the way to solve the problem is for two characters to just sit down and have like a 2-minute conversation, and they keep avoiding it. And that's supposed to be like the drama and the big thing they have to get over in the movie. And that does bug me. There is a little bit of this or of that in this movie. That's it's like a
15-minute stretch.
Yeah.
Like a little past the halfway point where, this is a long movie. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes. So going into this, I thought, because, the two, like Life of Brian and Holy Grail, are both like 90 minutes long, basically. Mm-hmm. And movies that are just kind of silly and have lots of humor in them. And it's sort of a situational stuff and or parody or satire. They can get old after a little while, where you just feel like you're kind of watching a bunch of connected like SNL sketches. Mm-hmm. And so my concern was the length of this movie and whether or not the story was going to be strong enough to maintain itself for that long, or if I was going to get halfway through and think like, okay, now we're just doing the same joke over and over. Yeah. And I'm kind of over it. And that was where that moment worried me, was because we were a little over halfway. It got to that point where, like you said, where it's just like, take 30 seconds for one character to explain to the other what is happening, and then we can move on. But then once that whole thing resolves itself, it's like a 15-minute part of the movie. Once they get past that, it's fantastic again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I was very happy to see that once they kind of get past that little bit in the middle, that it picks up and becomes great again for the rest of the movie. And God, it just reminded me of a line. I don't know if it's your quote though.
You can drop it anyways.
If it's what is it that she says? Care for a little narcolepsy?
No, care for a little necrophilia.
Necrophilia, that's what it is. Yes. is one of the funniest lines, and like contextually, it's so perfect.
Yeah.
Care for a little necrophilia.
There's also a setup, a joke that's set up with the people who type out everything that happens in like a courtroom.
Oh,
I forget what they're called.
We'll get to that when we talk.
We'll get to that, but just brilliant. I mean, there's some really brilliant setup, knockdown comedy bits in this movie
for sure.
But yeah, I think we should get to the stars.
Yeah, absolutely. Just give me a second here. We're without Adam, so I'm scrambling to throw up all of our fun visual stuff we got for the YouTube audience. We'll be right back with our star ratings.
All right. Um,
Okay.
you want to go first?
I can go first. Just give me one moment here because this. So I am going to give this 4.5 stars. I think this movie is absolutely fantastic. Really, the only thing knocking it down from a 5 was that kind of 15-minute lull
Mm-hmm.
in the middle. But otherwise, incredibly smart, phenomenal humor. I mean, just really, really witty stuff that
Mm-hmm.
you don't get without a great script and great performances. And it has all of that. And then just to have a fresh take on 1984 is very impressive. I will absolutely be watching this again soon.
Yeah, I am also giving this a 4.5. I went into this episode, it's a 4. I'm gonna have to go change my letterbox rating after this. Just talking about it with you and thinking about it more, I had to bump it up to a 4.5. Again, the only real weakness is the segment that you talked about, and now even getting ready for this episode and just talking about it with you, I feel like I really appreciate like the ending even more. I
Oh
think
yeah.
I think it really, even when it happened, I was like, "Ooh, that's very bold." But now that I've thought about it, I'm like, "God dang, that's like he just like he knew how to land the plane."
Yeah,
Like,
there's some stuff I want to discuss about the ending that we can get into in the spoiler
hmm
section of the
hmm
episode. And then last thing I just wanted to mention, I did redo my top 100 movies at the end of 2022, and I
hmm
currently have Brazil at number 90 for my 100 favorite movies
nice.
of all time.
That's
So
very high praise.
very high praise. It's absolutely fantastic. And then we will
hmm
announce this now and then again at the end of the episode. But
Yeah.
for the movie club selection number 2, which will be coming out on January 13th, we do have that pick for you here. And we are going to be watching McCabe and Mrs. Miller,
hmm
which is a 70s Western from Robert Altman, or sort of, I should say, a different take on your classic Western. And it fits very well in January because it is wintry, which is another different thing that you
hmm
see that you don't get in a lot of Westerns. So I'm looking forward to watching that. It is currently available on Criterion. Otherwise, you can rent it again in all the usual places for $3 or $4. So if you want to watch that before next week's episode and stick around for the spoiler discussion, we highly encourage you to do so. Other than that, I think, should we dive into the spoilers?
Yep, I think that's we are officially entering the spoiler zone. There we go. We'll get some sort of animation or something to mark the transition in the future.
Right,
But
some kind of music, some different music or something, or we'll figure something out. But this is the first episode of the movie club, so let's
give
just
us a
dive
break.
right into the end, because you
Yeah.
mentioned that it sticks the landing, which it does. There were lots of interesting extras on Criterion when we watched this there, and one of them was like 10 minutes about the painstaking process of getting this movie released in the United States. The
Okay.
studio forced them to trim this down to a 90-minute cut
Oh, we
with
saw there was an alternate cut there. Okay. So
with
that.
a happy ending. So
Ugh.
like I'm guessing it ended on the part where like his dream kind of ends
Yeah, like
and
he actually
doesn't go
escapes.
back to him actually being like
Still a captive.
lobotomized or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that I No, just absolutely not. This movie does not work if there's a happy ending. And that's why I'm
Mm-mm.
glad you brought up how the ending just sticks with you, because it is
Mhm.
sort of silly how you get there. Like that's also the moment where we clapped when Harry Tuttle comes gliding down to
Yeah.
rescue him.
Harry Tuttle and his band of fellow, terrorists or renegades or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah, they come rappelling down from the top of that massive dome, and yeah, we were just like, yes, like
yeah,
getting a daring escape. That's also where we get the brilliant payoff joke about the person who's keeping track, because she's she's keeping track of everything that's being said in the interrogation room. And earlier they set up that a lot of what she writes down is just like screams, like oh god, no. And she
right.
really records every noise that happens, and most of it is like torture. But then later, when there's this big escape and there's this massive shootout, they finally shoot their way out of the dome and they pass her as they go, and you just see that she's been typing out boom, boom,
Yep.
kapow.
That one absolutely killed me. Like the whole final sequence of this movie is so ridiculous and so thrilling. Like when Harry Tuttle finally evaporates in
into
like a pile of newspapers.
Yeah, the newspapers like overtake him and dissolve him away.
Yeah, and then he's gone, and oh my god, it's just
the old lady who's finally dead from the complications from plastic surgery, and we get to see her like dissolved body, and it's just like, oh my god.
Yeah, she just keeps looking worse every time we see her, and finally it's just her funeral. Which is amazing. I mean, there are so many things to talk about with this movie, but I mean, I don't even know where to start when you get into spoilers. I feel like I had a lot of stuff in my head, and now it's all kind of all over the place.
Yeah, I guess let's focus back in on the ending. Is just, I think to me it felt almost like the ending of like The Green Knight, where it's just a really executed, long, extended dream sequence that serves to like have it's saying multiple things. Like there's many points being made over the course of this long dream sequence, and then the twist at the end bringing you right back, and then like that kind of idea of like, well, what did it all mean? And I just thought like that's the last movie that I felt like had that feeling for me, where I wish I could watch that whole dream sequence again, because I bet there's a lot of more little detailed kind of through lines and stuff that fits with the themes even more than we caught the first time, because the first time we thought he was actually escaping, and it was just like, what is going on?
Yeah, so I think that's brilliant, and just kind of goes back to just the whole thing about these dreams that he has, where he's a hero vanquishing like giants and foes to save the maiden, which is just kind of an amusing thing to see, and very just interesting general commentary on like the only thing that like a male drone office worker, like it's just the most stereotypical male fantasy imaginable.
Yes,
where he's decked out in these just this ridiculous costume and like wielding a sword and
fighting a gigantic robotic samurai.
Yeah, and like when he's not flying through the clouds. It's just fascinating. And then so like the fact that it kind of goes back to that at the end, where it's just like fully encompassing him, and his like entire identity basically has been destroyed, and all he has left are these dreams. And it's an interesting thing to look at, because in one sense this felt a little bit like, have you ever seen Up in the Air with George Clooney and Anna Kendrick? Yeah, so that movie is one of the only movies I've ever seen where a character has an epiphany and then that makes their life worse.
Okay, yeah, interesting.
The ending of Brazil reminds me of that a little bit as well, because he kind of wakes up here and then tries to fight back, and he ends up, in some ways you can look at it certainly as worse off than before, but at the same time, is it maybe just kind of the same?
Yeah, interesting.
Like he's strapped to this thing. All of his identity and individuality and personality is ostensibly gone. Like, I mean, that's kind of what we're supposed to take from that, I think. And how different is that really from who he is at the beginning of the movie?
Yeah.
Or who everybody else is around him, who isn't part of this incredible HVAC resistance and like terrorist organization that's just bombing places, which some great lines on that as well, when he's finally talking to the woman he's infatuated with and has been dreaming about, and she's part of the resistance. And he says something about, I wish I could remember the line, but where he's criticizing her about the bombings, and then she kind of comes back at him and he says like, well, would you rather have like disorder or something? Like,
no, I think it was like, I think she kind of is criticizing him and working for the machine and the government. He's like, well, would you rather have terrorists? Like,
that's like, yes. And she's like, yeah, I think that would be better than what we have going on right now.
Well, and she's like, "Have you ever even met a terrorist?" She says that line
Right.
too. Yep.
Yeah. And
Um,
yeah, it's just like her and the guy who fixes his air conditioning, which I don't know if you had anything else on kind of that last bit, but I do want to circle back to Harry Tuttle at some point too.
we can circle back to Harry Tuttle. Two other things that I just remembered that I wanted to comment on. The brilliant shared desk thing with him and his
Yes.
coworker. Like provides great physical comedy, but also is also like a commentary on that world and stuff. Like he takes this big promotion, he thinks he's moving on up. They act like it's such a big deal, and then he gets there and it's like his office is even
It's like a
tinier.
closet.
Yeah, it's in a closet. He has to share it with someone else, and all that apparently he's supposed to do is fall around his boss and shout ideas at him all day.
Yeah. Yeah, and they play that for great. Everything about this movie is just like it's funny and very like good commentary at the same time, which I think is just what makes this hold up so well and makes it so rewatchable. And I did want to get back to the Bob Hoskins, and I can't remember the other guy, but like
that's what I wanted to go to.
Kind of how we're introduced to Harry Tuttle. First off, the way that the other guy gets killed because of like a bug got in the printer. And sends them after Harry Buttle instead of Harry Tuttle, and then nobody will take. And then rather than the government admitting a mistake, they're just committed. They cannot admit the mistake, and they just got to kill this Harry Buttle guy because otherwise they'd have to admit that they were wrong.
And then no one wants to. It's basically a question of like who, if anyone, is going to take responsibility or be blamed.
Right, which is kind of this goes back a little bit to like Ikiru, I think, for me, where like they just send people to like in a circle to different departments within this bureaucracy, and they're always like, no, you need this form, go talk to them. But they sent me here. It's like, yeah, well, they don't know what they're talking about. And then you just get sent to like 9 different departments, and nobody ever helps you accomplish anything.
Yeah.
And then which kind of leads us to where it started for Harry Tuttle, where his air conditioning goes off, and then like the government has to fix all the HVAC stuff.
Jonathan Pryce's
yes, excuse me.
Heating goes out. What was it? Sam's the main character's name. But yeah, his heating goes out, and so he calls for assistance, but he has to go through the red tape and the government channels to get government approved HVAC repairs.
Yes, and of course they take forever, and then he is like sleeping by the fridge and is woken up to Harry Tuttle pointing a gun at him, breaking into his home to fix his air conditioning against the law. And like the way that he describes it, where like he basically has a police scanner.
Yeah.
Where he listens to HVAC calls, and then when he asks him why he doesn't work there, he's like, "There's way too much paperwork." And I like the thrill of it when he looks like this, like this. I was crying. I was laughing so hard. For those of you on the podcast, not watching this on YouTube, where De Niro's just got some like very high powered, like basically magnifying glasses with some lights on the side. He kind of looks like a bug, and it's just describing how much excitement he gets from doing this underground illegal HVAC work.
Yep.
It's just absolutely brilliant. And then, of course, just the way that he leaves the scene.
Yeah, he just zip lines away, and it looks
with
so
the music
cool.
Too. I wish I.
Yeah, like that's when I was definitely getting the Batman vibes. It was so Batman-esque. And then when we follow that up, right? I mean, we're freaking out because of the scene we just saw and Robert De Niro and everything. And then like 2 minutes later, there's a knock at the door, and it's the government HVAC repair guys, and it's 2 of them, and one of them is Bob Hoskins.
Wearing these like cartoon hats, basically, that are just huge bills.
Yeah, huge bills, cartoon hats, right? And super kind of aggressive and unhelpful, right? Typical kind of shady mechanic types. But oh my God, the conversation they have at the door, because Sam is trying to be like, oh no, it's not a problem anymore. Like, you don't need to come in, right? Because he knows if they look into it, they'll find that it was illegally fixed, right? So now
he's itself did it.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, it fixed itself. And the way they both just cackle, fixed itself, did it?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And then they're
But
like villains that like reappear, and then
for
when they get
sure,
their comeuppance, it's also excellent.
it's
The suing
fantastic.
in the suit.
Also, Harry Tuttle again. But this is the moment where Sam kind of starts to wake up a little bit more because he's kind of encountered someone who's independent and fighting back, and it wakes up this individuality in him that he didn't really know, and this rebellion that he didn't know that he really had outside of his dreams. And he kind of
Mm-hmm.
wants some of that for himself. And I sort of noticed this. I thought it was really cool where probably a better image here. I mean, you can kind of see the light coming through, and with the shadows from the blinds, it's kind of striped along the
Mm-hmm.
wall, which is right along the side of Harry Tuttle here,
Mm-hmm.
almost like a wing.
Yeah.
And I mean, personally, I think that looks very similar to the wings that his character is wearing in this image here that he
Yeah.
imagines himself wearing, where they're kind of striped a little bit and they're white. And it's
Mm-hmm.
sort of, I
Yeah, I
think
can see it. Like
these are,
he's meeting a real life version of the hero that he
yes,
envisions himself to be.
exactly. I don't think that's an accident at all. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
attention to detail here is just magnificent all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of getting about as long as we want these to go. So, any kind of final points you wanted to touch on before we wrap this up?
Um, yeah, I guess like the stuff with his mom and the plastic surgeon and the
Yes,
and that whole thing. I mean, definitely, a lot of satire, and I did like how multiple times, like they'll be eating in a fancy restaurant, there'll be an explosion,
a
like
terrorist attack.
a terrorist attack 30 feet behind them, and they'll kind of look back and they'll be like, oh, and then they'll just go back to eating.
Yeah.
Like they're
And then the
so
restaurant quickly blocks it off so they don't have to look at it even.
yeah, and the waiter apologizes and they just keep going.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I thought that stuff was good. It's so interesting to me that the stretchy face thing has become like what shows up the most, when I felt like that was such a small part. That was like one brief thing and like
for
one
sure.
visual gag, and then the ongoing gag after that is just the deterioration of her friend, and you just see less and less of her.
Yeah,
But yeah, I thought the stuff with his mom was interesting enough. How you're like, she's kind of a villain because she's part of the system, but also like she's his mom, and I thought that was an interesting dynamic, having his mother be higher up in the society, so he kind of has the ability for upward mobility, right? He knows
yeah.
people.
Which does bring me back. I did want to, before we wrap this up, mention Ian Holm. The interactions when Ian Holm is his boss, like those
Hmm.
interactions are absolutely fantastic. And Ian Holm's sort of like jealousy or envy of the higher ups. Like he's the one who wants to climb that ladder.
Hmm. Hmm. Desperately.
And the way he expresses it is just very funny. I really enjoyed a scene that they had was like right after the first Harry Tuttle scene. And I think like back to back, that was when I was just like, oh, this movie is great.
Yeah, I also loved when I mentioned the restaurant scene. I remembered the waiter and the waiter's interaction and how you order off the menu.
Oh God.
How you're
Yeah.
just supposed to say a number.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't want to, and just the waiter just is incensed. Just
Yeah,
cannot believe it.
for sure.
No, yeah, a lot of great moments. I think this is a great movie to kick off the movie club. And I'm really glad I saw it. And yeah, talking about it, I've bumped it up a half a star, and I'd recommend it for pretty much anybody, especially if you like kind of weird, kind of fantasy, mind bendy stuff. I think you're really going to be into just the vision.
For sure. I think it's an incredibly effective and funny sort of social satire
Hmm.
and reimagining of Orwell's novel 1984. I just think this movie works in pretty much every way that it's trying to.
Agreed.
And then last thing, again, just another reminder in case somehow you missed it or you've forgotten. But again, this will be in the description of the episode as well. But next week's movie club pick is McCabe and Mrs. Miller.
Hmm.
So I just want to make sure we got that out there again before anybody tuned us out, which at this point, we're approaching 40 minutes. Can't say I'd completely blame them.
It's about
But
that time. There's some
yeah, I think
hardcore
it's
Brazil fans out there. I feel like
right.
I went to a New Year's party, and there were people there who were kind of big into movies, and I mentioned Brazil, and they just lit up. It's just one of those movies where
Same.
if you know, you know.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. Definitely see why it's such a beloved cult classic.
All right.
And with that, I think it is your turn to put a wrap on the show.
All right. What is this mess? An empty desk is an efficient desk.